This piece of work that I'm going to talk about now is an opportunity where we get to question or challenge established practice, and just to see if it fits with any new situation that we find ourselves in. And in this case, it's related to the temperature at which we store fresh market potatoes. Typically, they're stored quite cold, between 2 and 3.5 degrees, because that's thought to be the best temperature to maintain their quality in terms of, for example, skin finish or disease levels. But we all know that the cost of energy is not going to come down, it's usually increasing. And we also know that there is an effect of very low temperatures on the sweetening of potato, and hence perhaps on its eating quality. So the question we were asking in this project that I'm about to talk about is, can we increase the temperature of storage without, let's investigate. At what temperature can we store potatoes, and what is the cost and benefit of doing so? This was a 3-year project funded by AHDD Potatoes, and we took the decision early on to pick 4 varieties, so written up there, standard fresh pack potatoes. We had 3 particular temperatures that we were concentrating on: 2.5, 4, and 5.5. 5.5 would be very high for UK, but not necessarily for European markets. There's a line there that says that we also transferred from 2.5 to 5.5 degrees during the storage, but I won't talk about that because it didn't seem to have much relevance to our situation. In the second and subsequent years, we've used CIPC to control sprouting, and that's because sprouting was affecting the way we were able to measure, for example, respiration and weight loss. So there's some various assessments that we've been making to do with quality, so blemish disease, skin bloom, respiration, sprouting, and weight loss, and we made those at 2, 4, and 6 months. So this is a sort of medium storage trial. And then at the very end, we also did some processing and taste and texture work. So this is the first one. This is to do with skin finish and the effect of temperature. The top, if I can get this button to work. Yeah. So this is the skin bloom scale is from 1, which is a shiny, bright, acceptable potato, to 5, which is a dull, generally much less acceptable potato. I don't know how well you can see this, but at each of these different temperatures, this is at intake, and we can see all the potatoes have got good skin finish, good skin bloom, and then by 2 months that's deteriorated in all the temperatures and in all the varieties. And that deterioration continues in 2 monthly intervals. So at 6 months, the skin bloom finish is generally worse than it was at 2 degrees. And you can look at these at your leisure later on, but it's actually remarkably hard to find any difference in the effect of temperature on skin bloom. You can see different varieties seem to, their skin bloom diminishes faster or to a greater extent, but there's actually no effect of temperature here. So one of the skin blemish diseases we were interested in is black dot. There's a picture of it up here, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. And this is after 6 months storage, just to make the graphs fairly easy. And we've got the 4 varieties, so Desiree, in this case Desiree came in with quite a lot of black dot, King Edward with very little, Marfona with essentially none, and Maris Piper with a reasonable amount. And you can see that actually there's essentially no difference. There's been no effect of temperature on that disease development of black dot over that 6-month period. And that applies for all the varieties and at low or even high incidences. So there's no significant effect of temperature on black dot development over that time. Another blemish disease, silver scurf. Again, I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. And the same scenario. So I'm just describing the results after 6 months of storage for the 4 varieties at a wide range of temperatures. And if you were just to concentrate on 2.5, 4, and 5.5 degrees, if you take into account these error bars, there's essentially no significant difference in the level of silver scurf development with temperature over that 6-month period. Different varieties have got different amounts of silver scurf. That's what they came in with, and that's before we got control of them. So somewhat surprising, because I think we would have expected there to be some effect of temperature on disease development. And I think the answer here is it's to do with the way that people use pull down now. So fresh market potatoes are typically pulled down at very fast rates, so one degree a day where you can, and good control of condensation. Silver scurf, for example, is heavily dependent on condensation, not dependent, but condensation is a very aggravating factor for its development. So this is the effect of temperature on sprouting. This is for all varieties, so the data's been collated here. This is in year 1, so there's no CIPC around, and at 2, 4, and 6 months. This time, sorry, I'll get there in the end. So, unsurprisingly, at 2 months, there's a little bit of sprouting. This scale is 1 millimetre, so 0 to 5 millimetres. And that amount of sprouting increases at 2 monthly intervals. And it's clearly much more significant at 5.5 degrees than it is at 2.5 degrees. But there's not a great deal of difference between 2.5 and 4 degrees. So there is sprouting, there is a temperature dependence, but it's much more marked at that very warmer store temperature than at the lower store temperature. This is weight loss after 6 months. We've just been hearing a little bit about weight loss. And again, we tended to assume that there might be some significant difference in the effect of temperature on weight loss. But in reality, we simply can't find it. I think my thumbs are a bit too thick here. Fat, sorry. Yeah. So if we look at Desiree, so the weight loss over these temperatures, so 5.5, 4, and 2.5, there's no statistically significant difference in the weight loss over that temperature range, and similarly for the other 3 varieties. Again, a slight surprise, and for example, so we've got here with King Edward, there's 2.5, 4, and 5.5 degrees. So there's no real dependence of temperature on weight loss. We would have expected there to be a difference in respiration rate with temperature. This is based on some sort of somewhat older work that's been used as the industry standard basis, which said that at 2.5 degrees, potatoes would respire much more than they would at 4 and 5.5 degrees. And we simply didn't find that. So here we've got the 4 varieties at each of the sampling occasions, so 2, 4, and 6 months storage. And you can see the respiration rate. The best the only interpretation I can make from here is that Desiree and King Edward respire a little more than Marfona, just on average, and that at 6 months the respiration rate is starting to creep up in many but not all cases. But otherwise there's absolutely no significant effect of of temperature on respiration here. Again, so there's a very intriguing finding, and the AHDB potatoes has funded some additional work to validate this and to extend the range of temperatures that we do this work over. This would have been a key component. Respiration rate is a key component of energy demand, the amount of energy that we have to put into refrigeration. And so that has a consequence later on. Okay, so we're on fairly safe ground here. We know that there's low temperature sweetening, and we know that low temperature sweetening is more acute at lower temperatures. And this is exactly what this graph shows, that for the 4 different varieties, the chip colour is worse at the very lowest temperatures. So this is a scale of 1 to 5. This is the Sutton Bridge units here. And the scale actually goes above 5, not to 11, but at least to 5.5 here. So we can see getting on for half a unit difference, a Sutton Bridge colour difference per degree, per 1.5 degrees temperature. So that does make a significant difference. For those more familiar with the USDA units, they're actually listed down at the bottom of this graph. Okay. So we know that acrylamide's formed in foods that are fried or heated at high temperatures, and there's a relationship between an amino acid, usually asparagine, and sugars. And we know that frying chips, particularly to dark colours, will allow the formation of acrylamide. And this is an addendum then to the chip colour graph that I showed you previously, and it reiterates the fact that at lower temperatures, so 2.5 degrees, we get more acrylamide formation than at the lower temperature. So that fits with the chip colour pattern that we saw before, and acrylamide is something that's not really been looked at too much in the home cooking scenario. This project was supported by the FPSA, and after 1 year, actually at the end of the second year, they provided some expert tasters to do a taste and texture analysis for us. It was quite difficult to interpret that data because it's quite a small panel, and we couldn't really distinguish any significant differences between the taste and texture attributes that we asked them to look for. Based on an overall score, there was a slight preference for the potatoes stored at the very warmer temperatures, and lower temperature stored potatoes were judged sweeter, and again that fits with expectation and knowledge. So we thought we'd repeat this at the end of the third year, using a more sophisticated taste and texture analysis. Actually, we subcontracted this work out, and so because they're paying, we paid them good money to do it. They gave us this data in a form that's quite difficult for us to interpret, unfortunately. So we've got 4 varieties there, and these circles have got the attributes that were being scored. So wetness, earthiness, bitterness, sweetness, etc. I'm sure you can read it. And then there are the 3 temperatures. So when we look at shape retention, for example, they're the three temperatures, and they've all got very similar shape retention for Desiree. They've all got very similar colours for Desiree. Smoothness, there might be a difference. Flowery texture are very similar. Wetness, a bit of difference. Earthiness, there looks like more of a difference. And bitterness, bit of difference. And sweetness. But actually, when you look, sweetness is the only one in which, I think it's the only one in which, for all four varieties, the lower stored temperature potatoes were sweeter than warmer stored. For all the other attributes, there's no pattern there. So in the end, although none of these results were truly statistically significant, I think the only thing we can actually say is that colder stored potatoes are sweeter. I think we will try and repeat this work if we get the opportunity, just to give ourselves a bit more data, and perhaps we could perhaps use that to understand whether the decline in the consumption of fresh packed potatoes is somehow aligned to some of these changes in taste and texture attributes. So John Swain from FEC did some energy calculations based on the temperatures of the storage and based on the respiration rates that we had provided during this trial. And that you can see here that the cost of storage at the coldest temperature is more than at the warmer temperatures. No real shock surprise there. And there's a difference of about 11% between 5.5 and 2.5 degrees C. I'm sure if John, I can't see him at the moment, but I'm sure he's at the back there. So if you have any questions about that, you can either ask them after this presentation or when he's doing the store check this afternoon. So the summary. We've done a 3-year study studying the pros and cons of storage of fresh pack at those three different temperatures. There's no significant difference for bloom, for disease development, respiration or weight loss, but we did find some significant differences. Sprouting, particularly at 5.5 degree, chip colour and acrylamide content was significantly increased at the lower temperatures of storage, as was sweetening, and the cost of maintaining storage at 2.5 degrees was more than at 5 degrees, 5.5 degrees. So here's the overall cost benefit. The warmer it gets, the more sprouting, but perhaps, I've put improved eating quality here. I'm not sure if that's genuinely true, because I think maybe the UK market is quite well adapted to sweeter potatoes, and certainly because potato sweetening occurs it takes a little bit of time, maybe consumers just become adapted to it. Perhaps I ought to say, instead of improved eating quality, potatoes taste more like potato at warmer temperatures than when you've thrown some sugar into them. The downside of colder storage is the increased energy costs, fry colour and acrylamide risk, but there's a benefit of sprouting there. There's less sprouting, and therefore less sprout control is required. So the suggestion would be that an intermediate temperature, unfortunately we didn't do the trials at this particular temperature, so something less than 4 degrees, so 3.5 degrees, would give you lower costs, improved cooking quality, decreased black heart risk. I don't know, are we covering that today? No, we're not covering that today, but one of the problems at very cold storage is that without good temperature control within the store, some parts of it will be much lower than 2.5 and some will be clearly much warmer than 2.5. And there's some of the work that we've been doing at Sutton Bridge in collaboration with Cranfield is suggesting that at very low temperatures, tubers are at increased risk of black heart. Thanks to AHDB potatoes, so the new name for sponsoring this work, the FPSA for supporting it, John Swain for doing some of the energy work, and people from Sutton Crop Storage Research who actually did the work. Many thanks.